Welcome to the new SEC, where nobody is safe.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
There, what's up? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. It's the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, joined by our good buddy Leif Thulin, who is fresh off of hanging out with his mama and was staying up too late watching the I almost said American Open, Australian Open. That's a good time. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day. Although, truthfully, you're probably making this your lunch listen or watch of the day. And we want to remind you, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all you everydayers out there, and of course, all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. I do want to let you know we have another show that dropped today in addition to this live show where we're recapping all of the wild action from Tuesday night. I recorded yesterday an episode with Justin Giangrande, who is the founder and CEO of Network, one of the very first guys into the NIL space back in 2021 as things were getting going. So we just had a conversation about the state of NIL right now and things that are going on with his agency and the things that they're doing. So you can find that dropping today as well. Great conversation with Justin. As for today, Leif and I are going to get into the embarrassment that happened at Assembly Hall. It's funny because both these teams played Assembly Hall, but we'll talk about the Bloomington version of that. Auburn, no Broome, no problem for them. Poor DePaul almost ended their Big East losing streak. So much more great action to talk about. But Leif, we got to start with the SEC, which is just proving how many good teams there are in this league. Just because a team doesn't have a number next to its name means next to nothing because there's so many good teams. So last night, Leif, we had two top 5 teams lose in the SEC, and maybe that's not news itself, but the fact that both Alabama and Florida, numbers 4 and 5 respectively in the country, go down at home. Alabama loses to number 21 Ole Miss 74-64 in Tuscaloosa, while Mizzou, way to go, Mizzou, Caleb Grills out and playing, goes to the O-Dome and knocks off Florida 83-82. Mizzou was up big. Florida, a big-time comeback, but just can't get it done. Leif, at that big picture level, what does this say to you about the SEC? And then we can get into the games individually.
Well, it tells you the SEC's worst teams are capable of beating some of the best teams, which means that no one's safe, like you said. But also, it means that if you can take care of home court advantage, that may be the best path to winning the league. I said this a while ago, and I'm not sure if it was on this show or just on Twitter, but I think the best example of this would be like Purdue. Purdue has a chance to win the league, even though I don't think they're the best team in the Big Ten because Mackey's an insane home court advantage. So the best home court advantages in the SEC, I think, would probably be Auburn and Rupp. I think those are probably the best two. You can make an argument for Thompson Bowling for Tennessee. Alabama's been good recently, but I think those are because their teams are better as opposed to atmosphere. But I think with that all said, you see two top 5 teams go down at home. And I think that's a game that almost counts as 2 losses because not only were you favored, but it was a home game. If you're favored and it's on the road and you lose, okay, it's understandable. But now it demands perfection from other games at home. You got to win those ones against the better teams, especially in the case of Florida. No offense to Missouri, but Missouri is not the team that Florida should lose to if they lose a home game. So maybe it resets them, they get going, and maybe they were counting their laurels. Like you were reading those off and saying, oh, we're great. We're top 5. We've got all these big wins. But I don't know. I don't know if a reset matters in the SEC because you're going to lose. It's not like it's this hard reset. And now you have time to adjust. Florida's next couple games aren't horrible, but that loss, I think, is going to have repercussions throughout the year. Alabama surprised me as well. They were 12-point favorites.
Yeah, I mean, it's which of the, to that point, which of these, and maybe, I mean, it's tough because Ole Miss is the team that's ranked, Mizzou is not. But again, because everyone's so good, like Leif, in your estimation, which of these two was more shocking to you?
I'd say Florida losing, just because they're playing a team in Missouri that hasn't won a lot this year. At least Ole Miss, you knew was a good team. I thought Alabama would win. I thought that it would be a little closer than 12. I wasn't going to bet that one either way in terms of the spread, and that was out of respect for Ole Miss. But I still would have told you Alabama's going to win confidently. It was just, they're at home, they're playing better, they're starting to shoot better, they have their team coming together, Youngblood's back. I don't know. Alabama has been a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde, and they're still a top 5 team in the country, and that's why I have so much optimism that if they figure things out, that they're a problem. But they have games where they shoot terribly, and if they can't impose their will on the glass, then they're vulnerable, and that's what happened in this one. Florida shocked me more just because of Missouri didn't have the top 25 number by their name. They do have a good offense, but Florida doesn't have a problem in a shootout. So the fact that they were struggling so much defensively and they were struggling to score at a certain point in this game, trailing by as many as 19, I was pretty shocked by that. I actually still had faith, maybe blind faith, that Florida would win, but too little, too late.
Yeah, I'm with you, Leif. As they started, like when it was 19 in the first half, I was like, good grief. It was pretty quick after that, though, that they got it back down to single digits. And once they got, there was still plenty of time left in the second half. I think they cut it to 3 with like 8 minutes to go. And I was like, all right, Florida's got this. They're coming. But much credit to Mizzou for holding on the road, even after a big comeback like that, which Florida, with their great stable of guards, is obviously very capable of doing. Going back to the game in Tuscaloosa, when I was looking, you talk about Chris Youngblood being back. He took the most shots on this team, 10, but only made 3 of them, Leaf. And it's almost like a shot distribution issue, in my opinion. But the problem was, it's not like other people were doing much. LeBaron Philon, 0 of 8 from the field. Mark Sears, just 2 of 8. Grant Nelson was shooting well, but he only took 4 shots, 3 of 4. It's like, I would have liked to have seen this team get more shots from the guys that were on in this game. Jaron Stevenson, 3 of 6, Aiden Holloway, 5 of 6. And so that's almost just like an issue of not finding the right guys to take the right shots that struggles. Ramifications of this either way for these teams. Again, as you said, you got to hold serve at home. For Florida, they do get a little bit of a reprieve going forward. As you said, it's home against Texas, at South Carolina, home against Georgia, and as much of a reprieve as I guess you can get in the SEC. As for Alabama, their upcoming schedule, they're at Kentucky on Saturday, then host Vandy and host LSU. So if you could respond by picking up a road win in Rupp, then you feel like you should get those next couple games. But going to Rupp, very much a possibility that Bama could wind up with a back-to-back game losing streak here.
It's funny is I had Kentucky and Texas A&M on the other TV while I was watching Alabama. And I was thinking to myself, okay, Kentucky's not doing very well at the start of this game. I think they'll have enough horses because Wade Taylor wasn't playing. And I don't know if A&M scores enough to stay with Kentucky for the entirety. And the reason I bring that up is as Alabama was continuing to struggle, I was like, I wonder if they're getting all their misses out and they're going to just tear it up at Rupp because it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be at least 90-90. At least that's the feel of it. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, if Alabama loses this one, I feel like they're somehow going to go 1-1 in the week. And that's the only way to do it in the SEC. If you have a losing game, you got to rebound. But sometimes that turnaround is going to play a top 10 team at their place. And that's what it is. So this will be a true test of their mettle and their intestinal fortitude, but also just how able they are to adapt. Because like you mentioned about Chris Youngblood, we all talked about how Latrell Reitzel goes out, but it's okay. Chris Youngblood's coming back. If he shoots well, that's all right. Well, he's not shooting great, but also he just doesn't look as lean, as spry. I know there's a rehabilitation process getting him back into game shape, but he looks a little slow-footed, and there's a headiness that is attributed with being a veteran. But Alabama, what they do so well is they put so many athletes that overwhelm you. It's almost a reprieve in that sense. And unless he's shooting the ball well, it doesn't put them under the same strain defensively as dealing with all these guys who can crash the glass with their 6'11" small forward. And Darian Reed didn't play. I understand that's not the biggest note in this game because they have so much depth, but that's a really good player, and they've got a bunch of players. So I am not worried about Alabama or Florida in the long run. But the ramification you asked, I think it means that the SEC is going to be the team that wins the most home games. So I had thought to myself, maybe Alabama is the beneficiary of Johni Broome going out because they've got the most talent spread around the SEC, and Auburn's the best team But Auburn, I still don't think loses home games. So I'm still riding with Auburn, I think, because this game makes it harder for Alabama to climb back up the standings, harder for Florida to climb back up the standings because they're going to lose road games.
And we'll look at a couple other high-ranking SEC teams that did just fine at home. Thank you very much. Coming up here in a little bit. But Leif, before we do that, I want to move to the Big Ten where, oh my, Indiana got booed off their own home court at halftime. Umar Ballo's over here getting into fights. Umar Ballo's out here not trying. It was a whole thing inside Assembly Hall on Tuesday night. We're going to talk about that. And Mike Woodson, get that resume ready, bro. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about our good friends at Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has got everything you need all within your budget. Leif, seriously, I hate the end of Christmas because then I take everything down. My house looks barren after all the beautiful decorations have been up, and I'm like, man, we need something to fill this space. Well, the good news is Wayfair makes it easier to tackle those New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. My favorite part, they're free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. Wayfair's site, it's really easy to navigate, and you're going to find everything you need in just a snap. It's really easy to go find. So give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com/lockedon right now. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Oh, Leif. Illinois was apparently very displeased with their loss on Saturday. Again, another high-ranking team with a home loss. And they go into not their Assembly Hall, but the Bloomington version and absolutely crush Indiana 94-69. Obviously, a big part of this is that Jakucionis is back from his 2-game being out. And he was probable or questionable pregame, and thankfully he does play in this one. Has 21 points, 5 assists. Kylan Boswell has a career high 22. But man, the big storyline, Leif, Illinois dropped 60 points in the first half. The Bloomington crowd boos the Hoosiers as they go off the floor. I know ordinarily this conversation would be more about Illinois getting back on the horse after their home loss, but I feel like we got to talk about the Indiana side of this first.
I mean, here's the thing. Indiana's roster made absolutely no sense. With. And this is not hindsight. This is not me getting on my high horse, but I've been waiting for this segment.
That's right.
One of my best friends, I'm having lunch with him afterwards. He is an Indiana Hoosier alum, and he was like, man, we're going to win the Big Ten this year. And I was like, I hate to inform you, I hate your team. And he was like, oh, come on. Like, you're just being a hater. I was like, Will, when have I ever just been a hater of a team without a reason? Like, I take pride in not being a hater of a team because it drives me nuts. As I grew up a Stanford fan, everyone would be like, oh, you lost. And I was like, I'm glad you can read a box score. Now I bring that all up to say this. Why would you take your best player coming back was Malik Renew? Your next best player coming back was Mbako. So one of those guys should play the 4, the other one should play the 5. Why would you pay $2 million for Umar Ballo, who's been one of the most overrated players in college basketball the last 2 years? Impactful at times, but overrated. Then you go get Miles Rice, who I really wish into my Stanford Cardinal. Well, that's an aside. And he's a driver, though. He shot 28% at Washington State. All the good he does, it's wasted because he's a pick and roll driver, and he's very good at reading that. But you have no space for the roller nor his drive. So Mike Woodson and Indiana's afforded a luxury. Very few teams are, because they get a ton of money poured in, so they can get whoever they want. But they chose terribly, and it was not hard to see. And same with Kansas State. It was not hard to see that their teams made no sense. So I expected not that much. That said, I expected better and effort because I expect that from a collegiate basketball team. If you're playing, you got to play hard. Well, with money, it changes everything. So final bit of this rant, and I apologize for this going on.
You're great.
I said this about two months ago. Ben McCollum, get familiar with the name, Indiana Hoosiers. You're getting a D2 multiple-time champion, a guy who goes to Drake, starts the year undefeated, wins the Charleston Classic. He's winning with guys that are D2 players. You afford him the money that you're giving to your basketball team, the happiness of Hoosier hysteria. That's the guy that's going to be the Indiana Hoosier head coach. I said this 2 months ago, and I'm hoping we can retweet this when it actually happens. But Indiana's terrible. They're absolutely awful. I think they're going to miss the tournament. And Illinois is good, but being down 25 on your home court in a half is absolutely appalling, jarring, and honestly, if this were the NBA, you tarmac Woodson.
I mean, honestly, and I can't remember who it was. Somebody had tweeted after the game, basically like, "All right, Indiana fans, who are we looking for? Who's the head coach?" And we said it all off season, all spring. Go get Dusty May now. Don't wait for this to happen. And they twiddled their thumbs and didn't do what they should have done. And now Dusty May is killing it in Ann Arbor. Michigan looks great. You could have brought him home. So the answer to who should we get is, well, we messed up and we should have got Dusty May. Could they steal him from Michigan after one season? I mean, that's only in Dusty May's head to know, and maybe his family's head. But with what he's doing at Michigan in year one, you know the Wolverines are going to make it very difficult for him to leave and go to Bloomington. I don't see that happening. So I think they've missed. But as you said, there are some other potentially good options. Let me just give some of the other wild statistical things from this. Per Jared Burson, who's a great stats guy, Illinois' 94 points on Tuesday night are the most a visiting team has ever scored in a regulation game at Indiana's Assembly Hall, which opened in the 1971-72 season. The 25-point margin of victory is the second largest ever by a visitor. Also, Indiana has now lost consecutive games by 25 points each for the first time since November 24th and 25th of 2008. Leaf, and as a reminder, their previous loss was 85-60 at Iowa back on Saturday. And so, Leaf, I mean, that's like a decade and a half since Indiana has lost back-to-back games this poorly. I mean, it's to watch them on the floor. I don't like, folks, if you didn't watch any of this, just go back and watch some of the highlights at least. You see guys just like moping around the court, not even being engaged in what's happening. I mean, it is like there are times when we can overblow things like this, and I get that. We are not overblowing any of this. Indiana is in a real danger zone here right now. They're 13-5 overall, 4-3 in Big Ten play. But things could get real bad in a hurry. I'm looking on their KenPom page. Of their they've played 7 Big Ten games, 20 total. So of their 13 remaining Big Ten games, they are only favored, Leaf, in 3 of them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, look, let's talk the Illinois side of this, because I don't want it to be just bashing Indiana. It's got to be about good on you, Illinois, for responding to that USC loss at home by 10, by double digits, and doing to what you've done to a lot of other teams this season, right? Like at some point, yes, this is about Indiana, but also about Illinois doing what they've done. Let's remember the crushing of Oregon a couple weeks ago, obliterating Penn State last Wednesday. So like Illinois is wildly capable of doing this to teams, and they've done it at least twice now on the road, both Oregon and Indiana. I mean, how important do you think Jakucionis' return to the lineup was on Tuesday night?
Well, when he plays, they're the best team in the Big Ten.
Ooh, that's
none.
a statement.
Like I don't think it's very close, actually. And here's why. And that's that's not a shot at Michigan, Michigan State, or Purdue. Those teams I think can win, but they have to like fight tooth and nail to get wins. When Kasparas plays for Illinois, you can't maintain the like the way they score and the pace that they play offensively, the other teams can't maintain. And not to mention Illinois, when he plays offensively, they can do that. But defensively, Kylan Boswell, Trey Waite, some of these guys have really bought in, and they're a top 15 defense. And Brad Underwood had a famous statement, and maybe famous is overblowing it, but it was a big statement at the beginning of this season. and he said, hey, we can't guard a high school team right now. We just hope we can outscore you. Well, they're a top 20 defense in college basketball right now. And then
they're top 7 at KenPom right now.
Yeah, and so they moved it up. So I hadn't checked the refresh. They were 13th entering this game.
Their defense is rated more highly than their offense at KenPom.
And when Kasparas plays, it's even better offensively. And all they had to figure out is they've had 2 games early in the season. One was against Oakland, where Oakland played this weird zone, and Jakucionis was just kind of looking to pass the ball. And all of a sudden he decided, you know what? I can score 20 anytime I want, and then I'll get other people open. And ever since then, Illinois has been a top 10 team in college basketball. I don't think that there's any other team in the Big Ten that's got the level to reach an Elite 8, Michigan State intrigues me because they've got Izzo, but they don't have interior scoring that wows me. They don't have even a go-to scorer that wows me. Purdue's issue is they don't have the athleticism. They don't have the answer solver and Edey. They're still good, but they don't have the dynamism that blows you off the court that Illinois does. Michigan has a unique combination of their interior. They've got two bigs that can punish you and one who can really make plays, but they don't have good guard play, in my opinion. It's in terms of the best teams. So I think Illinois is clearly the best team in the Big Ten. And if Jakucionis plays, the numbers would support that. They've beaten Oregon by 32 at Oregon. They've beaten Penn State by 40. And then Penn State was a team that beat Purdue. They've beaten Indiana at Indiana by 1 billion. It could have been 7,000 for all I care. And I think they're clearly the best team. So it's not all about Indiana being terrible, but that's the storyline because they paid $2 million for one player. Imagine what they paid for the whole team. And they've got the proud tradition, and they don't look like they're trying. That's the storyline. But Illinois will do that to teams. And I think Illinois is going to win the Big Ten. I was on Oregon early in the year. That was my pick before the season. I thought I was being really clever. I think it's Illinois, and I think it's Illinois by not that close, actually.
Okay, man, crazy stuff. Also didn't mention, but double-double for Tomislav Visic, who was right in the middle of that fight. Loved hearing Coach Underwood basically saying, like, I'd go to war with this dude anywhere, but I wouldn't want to face him in, like, I forget what parking lot, like a Walmart parking lot or something like that. Crazy stuff. You love to see it. Now, Leaf, we got to go back to the SEC because, as I mentioned, while home games were tough for Alabama and Florida on Tuesday night, there were a couple other SEC teams playing ranked opponents at home that had no problem, including Auburn, who was Johni Broome-less. We'll get to all of that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Rocket Mortgage and their great app, Rocket Money, which can help you find any subscriptions you forgot about, or maybe subscriptions you were paying twice for, and help you track it down and take care of it and get rid of it. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your subscriptions. It'll help you monitor your spending and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Brings everything together in one place. It's this great one-stop shopping tool. So whether that's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this 2025 year, Rocket Money, they have over 5 million users and have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members like you up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Great opportunities to go use Rocket Money to really simplify things and help weed out subscriptions. So cancel those unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, Leaf, we're right back to the SEC where while, there were some struggles for some other teams, Auburn, it's funny, yesterday on our show, Andy Patton asked the question, hey, is Auburn on upset watch without Johni Broome? And the answer is definitively no. The Tigers at home against number 15 Mississippi State, 88-66. Meanwhile, Kentucky at home against number 11 Texas A&M, who was without Wade Taylor the fourth again, unfortunately, 81-69. Leaf, let's start with Auburn, man, because there was question, as we said earlier, like, what will they look like? Who will they be without Johni Broome? And man, as we look at this, absolutely no problem for the nation's number one team. And CBM steps up a 20-point game for him with 17 for Chaney Johnson stepping in for Johni Broome. That is a big time development for Bruce Pearl.
And we knew Chaney Johnson would have to step in and be kind of the volume guy. Like Dylan Cardwell is more than capable of being a starting center. And he is a starter, but Broome takes the forefront of the attention, and deservedly so. But Chaney Johnson, in a couple of the bigger games they've played this year, has been excellent. Against Houston, I think he was the key that won them that game, providing a lot of the offense. Well, what Auburn has is a depth, a surplus of top-tier athletes that know where they're going to get their points, and they've bought into the analytical model of shooting a bunch of threes. They do have these moments where it's like, why are they shooting those? Like, they go in these lulls, but when they're hot, and then their defense keeps them afloat for those lulls and then just spurs them on for those highs. So you look at Chad Baker-Mazara. He's one of the players that I would consider the most spurtable, and I know that's not exactly the best word, but
I know I'm tracking.
But yeah, he's one of those guys who can get red hot. He's a microwave. So he starts the game. absolutely on fire. You're not going to win that game. I don't really care what happens. In Auburn, you're not winning that game if you're Mississippi State. And Mississippi State's a good team. And then you have Miles Kelly, who shoots these balls from like 30 feet away. And when he's hot, you're not touching Auburn. So you really just need to hope for a few games in which those two guys don't shoot well. Tahad Pettiford has to force shots. But Auburn, the reason I bring that up, if you're the opponent, but that's so many people deep in the scouting report. And then there's Chaney Johnson, who steps in and fills in some of that interior scoring. Cardwell is one of the best defenders in the country, should be in the National Player of the Year defensively candidates. So I kind of think that Auburn's going to win every home game with or without Johni Broome. And then it'll be on the road. How do those players that were role players and now are elevated into like super utility, maybe even borderline all conference guys like Chad Baker-Mazara, how do they play on the road? How do they play on the road without someone who creates them those looks? And that's where I'll be interested. I never really felt like Auburn was going to lose this game, but I didn't expect the dominance, just outright dominance without Broome that they provided.
And that was the shock to me, Leif. I'm with you. It's the margin of the victory that it was pretty comfortable the whole time. I feel like there was one point they were just like coasting through in the second half and then had to push it back out. But you and I said it on Saturday's game night show that this could be a potential blessing in disguise for Auburn, who frankly struggled at South Carolina Saturday. They were fortunate to win that game and came back and showed like, nah, we are the nation's #1 team right now for good reason. Elsewhere in RUP, Kentucky, number 8 in the nation, handles number 11 Texas A&M by 12, 81-69. Unfortunately for A&M, look, they've been battling tough in these games without Wade Taylor IV. Had that big comeback to beat Oklahoma. But thankfully for that, if it were not for that, they'd have a 3-game losing streak on their hands. Of course, that's going to be most teams when they play Alabama and Kentucky. But you know what? Just too much Wildcats, especially without Wade Taylor IV. And we had Jackson Robinson kind of leading the way there for the Wildcats, 22 points, while Zurich Phelps continues to do what he's been doing for A&M in Wade Taylor's absence, 21 points for him. And a really nice game here for Kentucky, again, to just get this home win and continue to do what you got to do.
Kentucky's very good at solving the riddle. Like Texas A&M made it their game in the first half. Kentucky stayed afloat and even took the lead right before half. And you kind of felt, oh, Kentucky's going to win this because they've got more horses. That was the thought before the game. But then you don't know which horse is going to lead the race for Kentucky.
That's right.
So they've got a lot of guys that'll score, and we've known that. But they can solve the riddle defensively of even the most athletic teams like Texas A&M because they have complex actions and you don't know who to take away. I do think Kentucky is vulnerable against teams that athletic if they have enough horses to score. And that's where Wade Taylor's absence was particularly noticeable. At the end of the game, Kentucky could put their best 2 defenders, which are both guards, on one player, Zurich Phelps, and make it very difficult. So I'm not out on Texas A&M by any means, but they need Wade Taylor to truly contend. But I think this is a blessing in disguise for Texas A&M to find out how to play without a guy like Wade Taylor. And then Kentucky is going to have a true test of how they deal with athletes who can score the ball this Saturday at Rupp Arena against the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, man, I'm very, very excited for that game. It should be a lot of fun. By the way, did you see that Otega Owe dunk on Tuesday?
Oh yeah, the SEC was showing some dunking ability.
Dude,
Otega Owe poster. Tahad Pettiford's like 6 foot barely and threw down a windmill with his offhand.
Dude, I love Tahad Pettiford. I love watching that dude play. He's got it. Whatever it is, my man is got it. One other SEC result from Tuesday night. Leif, Arkansas loses again. They fall at LSU 74-78, meaning that for the first time in his career, John Calipari is 0-4 in SEC play. Look, I don't know that I would have picked it to be Arkansas, but somebody in this loaded league was going to not have a good year. And the Hogs sitting here at 0, it was either going to be them or LSU at 0-4 because both of them came into this game 0-3. And man, I'd tell you, it is just a crazy thing to see here. And so Janelle Davis, Andy wrote up an article this week about like the biggest transfer disappointments in each conference, and you hate it, but he is the answer to the SEC's who's the biggest transfer disappointment. I still can't wrap my brain around it. He's not even starting right now, and just tough. Things are tough sledding for the Hogs right now.
Another team that bought their team, and I understand Calipari's a little different because he brought the guys from Kentucky.
Right.
But the team didn't make sense. They have a point guard in Boogie Flan. He's at least put the ball in his hands, but they play non-shooters next to him. DJ Wagner can't shoot the ball. I know he went 2 of 3 this game. That doesn't exemplify the whole season, though. Adu Thero, not a good shooter, although he's been their best player this year. Adu finally starts over Avicic, and they've been better, but the team just doesn't fit. And it's, hey, are our athletes and individual talents going to win the game? And in this league, the answer is no. They're going to be a team that, if they make the tournament, will barely squeak in. And I'm starting to think to myself that this could be a team that is a surprise omission, because they're going to lose a lot of games. Like, this is a game you have to win. LSU is favored, and deservedly so. But if you're Arkansas and you're expecting to make the tournament, you got to win that game.
Yeah, Arkansas, I mean, upcoming schedule for them: at Mizzou, host Georgia, host Oklahoma. So some potential wins there. Oh, but then Leaf, we are just a few short Saturdays away from the return to Rupp Arena, and that's what I got circled on my calendar. I cannot wait for that, Saturday, February 1st. All right, we got a couple other games we got to quickly get to because there was so much great action on Tuesday. Leaf, the poor DePaul Blue Demons, I just, excuse me, feel so bad for them. This team now, 39-game Big East regular season losing streak. Second time in the last 3 games they go to overtime, and this one would have been doing it in style. They lose at home to number 7 Marquette, 85-83. Had opportunities. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up just thinking about it. No, I can't clear my throat. Man, they had opportunities to win this game, to get it to a second overtime, whatever it is, and Marquette let them hang around. It felt like watching the game. I had it in my quad box, and I was like, the plays were happening for DePaul that you think, like, this is the type of play that you need in a big time upset. Those were happening, and it just didn't at the very end. I hate it for DePaul. Good win for Shaka Smart's team, but now the losing streak's at 39.
I mean, the story to me is DePaul is getting better, but Marquette I'm a little concerned about. They've played 2 just games where they squeak by inferior opponents. This is nothing new. We've talked about contenders and pretenders at various times throughout this season. And if you got one horse, and Cam Jones is a heck of a horse. He's
a heck of a horse to have.
First team All-American and top 3 national player of the year. But they don't have enough scoring. They can mask some of those deficiencies with their ball pressure, get out in transition. If Joplin or Gold hit threes, they have a few answers. Stevie Mitchell's gotten better. I really love Chase Ross. I think he's got NBA potential, but they don't fit in as scoring. They fit in as a very well-coached team, very cohesive unit. They don't have the firepower, though. And so in the grand scheme of things, that's my takeaway, because I care more about Marquette than the DePaul Blue Demons. That said, DePaul's getting better, and that's really good for the Big East, because the Big East had a few just basement dwellers that you couldn't watch the game because they were so bad. Well, now they're watchable. Like, Georgetown's actually a pretty decent team. DePaul's getting significantly better, and that'll help the Big East in the get more teams in the tournament, because they're going to be playing better teams, so it looks better on resumes.
Yeah, whereas last year they had just only UConn, Marquette, and Creighton made it in last year, so hopefully they can get some more in this year. Right now, I mean, Marquette, St. John's, UConn, Creighton's probably in. I think that's probably the cut line right now for me. Because after that's Villanova, Georgetown. Villanova lost again.
No, Nova could make it because they have a few good wins.
They can, but the UConn win, I don't know if it's enough. Like, they lost to Xavier yesterday, right? Like, you got to win that game if you want to make the tournament. Yeah. We'll see what happens. Big East, really interesting to make sense of. Butler also winless in the Big East. Leaf, I got 3 other games I want to mention in passing, and just see if you have any takeaways from any of those. And then we'll mention a few games that are upcoming tonight. So last night, Arizona continues. They are still undefeated in Big 12 play. Handled number 25 Baylor at home, 81-70. Good to see the Cats continuing to turn things around. Louisville wins at Syracuse, 85-61. It's not notable because of the game, but because of this. Now, Louisville has 13 wins in their first 18 games. That means that they have more wins this season than they did combined the last 2 years combined, where they had just 12 wins. That is crazy. Good on Pat Kelsey for how quickly he's got this thing going. And then Miami at number 3, Duke. Blue Devils win 89-54. I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, Miami winless in ACC play, 0-6, but also Malik Brown, a no-go for Duke, unfortunately, last night. If he's out for any extended period of time, that is a hurt to their defensive capability, just in his on-court leadership and everything he does. So hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later. Cooper Flagg follows up his career game with a really solid performance. That's the thing that's great. But then you get Con Knippel leading the way yesterday with 25 points. Leave from those three: Arizona's win, Louisville's win, Duke's win. Any big picture takeaways for you?
I can speed through. Louisville basketball being back is great for basketball, so I'm thrilled.
Yes.
Duke was obviously going to blast Miami. Malik Brown's out for a little while is what I've heard.
Yep.
So he's got a knee injury. I think he's going to be out a while, and it looks like Gillis will take those minutes and play the 5. So
he had double figures in that game.
And it'll be important to see how they defend with him because he's not as long as Malik Brown, but he does shoot better. So I think this actually could be a blessing in disguise. And then the real one I want to talk about is I don't think Baylor's team makes sense. It's not well built. Norchad O'Meara is a 5 masquerading as a 4. Defensively, makes you inept if you play him at the 5. So you play 2 bigs. That makes their offense have no spacing. Baylor's a fraud. Arizona, on the other hand, is still not a team that I think is a real legit threat to win a championship. But their team's finding a way, and they have far better depth than you probably imagine. They had their leading scorer yesterday was Henry Visar, who is a guy who comes off the bench. He played 20 minutes. He had 19 points.
That's
then they had KJ Lewis, who has started over the past 2 years at different times. He had 11. Then you had Carter Bryant, who's a 5-star All-American coming off the bench, who I think is pretty good. And then you had and their starters were 13 points, 9 points, 8 points, 8 points, 8 points. So you had 8 guys really contribute and athletically overwhelm a team in Baylor that is supposed to be and was supposed to be a top 10 team coming into the country. So I think Arizona is one of the best 4 teams in the Big 12 and maybe best 3, maybe, but probably 4th. And I think they're a better team than they're getting credit for because they had a tough start to the season. But I think Tommy Lloyd's figuring out the best lineup. And what was a blessing in disguise for him was he got one of his floor cloggers off the floor. Mo Krivas got hurt, and that was unfortunate, but it created the opportunity to see that their team flows better when playing a guy who can stretch the floor.
I can't put them top 3. I don't see them getting rid of Houston, Kansas, or Iowa State, but I could hear top 4 for sure with that.
I'm confident in top 4. 3 is a stretch, but maybe they end up higher in the Big 12 standings than a team like Kansas, who already has some slip-ups. And I don't necessarily think they're a better team. I want to clarify that. I just think that in terms of the standings, they could be
like an unbalanced schedule might allow it to happen. Leaf, I forgot one other game I did want to mention. Mountain West now has a sole leader in first place because New Mexico, yikes, went to San Jose State, who was 1-5 in Mountain West play coming in and lost 71-70. So New Mexico falls to 6-1 in Mountain West play. That's not a good loss for
Utah State.
Yeah, right. That's not a good loss for the Lobos. So we'll have to keep tabs on what happens there. Speaking of Utah State, here's some games that are coming up tonight, Wednesday, the game of the night. Those aforementioned Kansas Jayhawks, number 9, going to Ames, Iowa against number 2. Iowa State is second in the nation, Leaf. This is awesome. 7 p.m. on ESPN2. This is going to be a game. If Iowa State is really going to win this Big 12 conference, tonight is a big opportunity to put a flag in the ground on that. We've also got in SEC action, number 23, Georgia at 6, Tennessee, 8 p.m. on SEC Network. West Virginia goes to Houston, number 10. That's 8 p.m. on ESPN Plus. On paper, that shouldn't be a game, but West Virginia has done it a couple times this year, so we'll keep an eye on that. You just mentioned Utah State. They're on the road at UNLV, looking to hold on to that sole possession of first place in the Mountain West Conference. That's an important opportunity for the Utah State team coming off of that crazy win Saturday night. And then the 2 new SEC schools are playing each other. That's not all that crazy fun of a game, but I just thought it was neat that Texas at Oklahoma for the first time as SEC schools tonight. And that game, by the way, 10 p.m. Eastern tip on SEC Network. Yuck, that's gross and late. Leaf, just give me one quick take. What game are you most excited about tonight?
Oh, Hilton Magic all day. It's not even close. And I like all those other games, but you give me those 2 top 10 teams in Hilton. It's like Buddy Hield and Kansas. That's the type of game. I know he didn't go there, but the point being is when that era with all those teams go to each other, those produce epics. Monte Morris, George Niang against Jamari Traylor and Perry Ellis. That's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting some awesome Big 12 hoops tonight.
Oh man, it's going to be great, Leaf. I cannot wait for it, folks. Make sure you are tuned in for another great Wednesday night. These Tuesdays and Wednesdays all season long are going to be phenomenal. If you've not yet subscribed to the show on both video and audio, make sure you do that so you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball, including our brand new Locked On CBB College Game Night on Saturday. It's a blast. Leaf is hosting that show. It'll be Andy with him this week. I've done it the last couple. It's been so much fun to kick that off. If you are not yet part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we're talking college basketball together all day long, it's a blast. Come join us. That link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to join. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes, and shouts to our favorite coach, Mick Bruins. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.